I hope that you have heard this word cantonment. Nowadays, in free India, in democratic India, cant means the military base, cantonment. We call cant short form cantonment, that means the military base. But during British rule, cantonment means that a separate kind of area where the high society people, that means especially the British, they used to stay there. Wide roads and streets, neat and clean, well maintained, big bungalows, both the sides of the streets, in a very planned way. Broad street where all the streets were quite broad, and both the sides of the streets there were huge bungalows. Architecture, it was quite nice, quite attractive. That is called cantonment. And now, nature of urban areas. What are the natures of urban areas? Before the 19th century, Indian cities were small and had a wall running. You know, during Mughal period, the architecture was entirely different. When British, they built, that is far different from the Mughal architecture. So they wanted to remove those architecture, they wanted to remove those or demolish those buildings, and new types of buildings they built according to their plan. So during Mughal period, what was the pattern? What was the pattern of the buildings? Those areas, a huge area that was surrounded by walls, and after that there were segments, the thana. After the thana, darwazas, that means many doors in that area. Exit door, entrance door during Mughal period. And after that thana, there were many mohallas, known as mohallas. First thana, then mohallas. Those were sort of cubicles, you can say, segments, and in a huge boundary. One town is there, and it is surrounded by a boundary. There was a wall, and many gates, big gates were there, known as darwaza. And after that, many thanas were there, and after the thanas, the mohallas were there. So the British, they had a plan to remove all those things. So they removed those things. They demolished, and they built many new structures according to their convenience. So the towns had big bungalows and clock towers. The localities were given English name, suffixes like town, park, garden. What did they build? What did British build after demolishing those things? So they built wide streets and roads. Apart from that, big towers. They built big towers also. Guys, you know, still many cities, many towns in India, there are clock tower. I hope that some of you have already visited where clock towers are there, even in Allahabad, in Lucknow, those cities, Aligarh, clock towers are there. Huge clock on the top of a tower. Those were built by the British. That was the significant place. It was the landmark during that time. Apart from that, British, they also built park, they maintained it, garden, and the names of those roads, those areas, those park and the buildings, those were after any British personality, whether governor, whether British scholar, whether British poet, philosopher, whoever. English personality. Now let us come to the main point, guys, on page 66 under the heading, the 7 cities of Delhi. In the beginning, when I started my lecture, I told you about the dynasty, the Sultanate dynasty, the Tughlaq dynasty, the Khilji dynasty, the Mughal dynasty. So since centuries, many dynasties, they ruled India, and later on they have become the inhabitants of India and they are called Indians. So according to these dynasties or according to these rulers, there are segments. The first city was Lal Kot. The first city was Lal Kot or Kila Rai Pithoda, it is known. The first city known was Lal Kot or Kila Rai Pithoda. All names are related to Delhi, because Delhi, still it is the capital of India, and there are 2 parts in Delhi, you know, Old Delhi and New Delhi. So these are all the part of, usually these are the part generally of Old Delhi. So Lal Kot or Kila Rai Pithoda. Then next, the second city was Siri. It was built by Alauddin Khalji. Siri. The third city was Tughlaqabad. It was built by Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Those are the segments of Delhi. The fourth city was Jahanpana. The meaning of Jahanpana means refuge of the world. Refuge of the world. Who gives refuge to the people. It was built by Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Then the fifth city was Kotla Firoz Shah. I don't know whether you know the name of Firoz Shah Kotla Stadium in Delhi. So Kotla Firoz Shah. It was built by Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Then the sixth city was Din Panha, which means refuge of religion. One is refuge of world and this one is refuge of religion. It is called Din Panha. Panha means refuge. And the seventh city was Shahjahanabad. It was built by Shah Jahan. So guys, these are the 7 segments, areas, parts of Delhi since the Sultanate period till the Mughal period. Now Shahjahanabad, where it is situated, Shahjahanabad. Shahjahanabad, Shah Jahan began the construction of Shahjahanabad in 1639. We will memorize the date. 1639. The city consisted of a fort, palace complex and a residential area. There was a wall running all around the city. Just now I told you why British they removed all those walls, because most of the cities or towns, those were amidst one huge boundary. It was surrounded by wall. Many doors were there, exit entry, thanas, mohallas. So here, Shahjahanabad, it was surrounded by huge wall. And city consisted of a fort palace complex and a residential area. There was a wall running all around the city. There were 14 gates. 14 gates were there. Those were the characteristics of the Mughal period. They were fond of building those structures. So, some that still stand are Lahori. Lahori Gate is there. Still, those are existing. Those have become the heritage. Delhi Gate, Ajmeri Gate, Kashmiri Gate, those are existing in Old Delhi. Turkman Gate, Kabuli Gate, Nigambodh Gate and Mori Gate. So those were the characteristics of the chief features of the architecture of Mughals or the architecture of the Islamic dynasty. So guys, the important paragraph, there were several muhallas and bazaars in the city. The rich lived in grand mansions. Mansion means haveli, huge mansions. In the city, the rich lived in grand mansions called havelis. There were also many baulis or step wells, that means wells. Those were known as baulis. People used to fetch water from the baulis, which were used to store water. Shah Jahan also built the Jama Masjid. It is still existing. One of the biggest mosques and masjids in India, Jama Masjid. In the city, the roof of the mosque had 3 domes with alternate strips of black and white marble with their topmost parts covered in gold. You know very well Shah Jahan, he was very much fond of art and architecture. And it is only Shah Jahan, he built Taj Mahal in the memory of his beloved or of his most beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. So, it was also built by Shah Jahan. The roof of the mosque had 3 domes with alternate strips and black and white marble with their topmost parts covered in gold, and it was largest congregational mosque in India, nearly 25,000 people. The capacity of the mosque is 25% people, that means congregation can attend to perform prayer, Jama Masjid. So Shahjahanabad was an important center of Sufi culture. Sufism. Sufi, I think you have heard this term Sufi. Sufis are a segment that during religious movement in the medieval period, when religious movement Mirabai, Kabir, Sant Kabir, Mirabai, during that time Guru Nanak, simultaneously Sufis, this category also emerged. They used to sing songs, and through songs they used to pray and worship. They were known as Sufis. So that is why the Sufi culture, it had several dargahs. Still there are many dargahs where Sufi songs they do perform, and they are maintaining their culture and their custom, their ritual. Thousands of people visited the dargah of Khwaja. You have heard already, Khwaja Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, one of the famous Sufis during medieval period. So guys, this much for the day. I don't want to drag or don't want to pull this chapter unnecessarily to exaggerate this chapter.